In this week's Stompy 51 miniature adventure, we're going to look at the 16 orcs that I painted up as marauders for my Firefight Marauder force. Because I have so many squigs and love painting more. But it was put to me in my last game of Firefight that all of these squigs, aka more beasts in the game, are great fun at chewing into your enemy, but they are beasts and basically can't hold objectives. And so I realised that I needed more of an infantry horde. And although Mantic does some absolutely lovely futuristic orc boys, I have a massive pile of Games Workshop orcs, which have been sitting in a box for about 20 years.
And so here they are. But why, you might ask, should I bother watching a video about something as mediocre as a bunch of late 90s, very early 2000s plastic orcs that were left in circulation for far too long? And what I would say to you is, because it's really around the principle of it's all great fun to paint characters, but you do need to get around to painting infantry. And also, what do you do with the piles of miniatures in your collection, which are probably a little bit past their sell-by date? So I had a whole pile of these plastic orcs, which I'd, in the late 90s, tried to do conversions with. You can see the high quality of the conversions and what the paint jobs were like, i.e. not great. These parts weren't on there, and actually half of the orcs were kind of broken with bits falling off them in the bag, and for whatever reason I'd never got around to parting with them. But then I thought to myself, let's get creative, let's look at what other bits I've got floating around and see how we can soup them up like some kind of dodgy dossier, albeit a dodgy orc. By the way, ignore that kids party going on next door. They're kind of more like little goblins and Gretchens than they are little well-behaved elves. But then again, my odds have never been any better. Anyway, so that's what I was faced with, and I'd done this over the years kind of in patches. I remember one sunny afternoon a couple of years ago, I don't know what went through my mind, but I thought, hey, why don't I get those out and just sort of see what bits I've got? And they were all largely waiting for me. And then after that game of Firefight, realizing that I needed a whole load more of these Marauder brawlers, aka orc boys, I would just work through what I had and actually paint them. So I went through a patch in the 2000s of imagining that there was this kind of weird orky cult, and and they'd all kind of shown their devotion to Mork or Gork by painting their heads blue, in the same way as kind of, they weren't snake bites, what were they called? The ones that used to steal everything. I've forgotten the name of all of the orc clans. Comments below. So anyway, so the first thing I did was just grab pieces that I had. So this guy, you can see, has got a left arm from the Warhammer Fantasy Battle sprue. And actually just talking to them as I go, that's some kind of rust effect. Because the other principle is, if you do want to paint infantry and get through old stuff, you've got to come up with methods to kind of keep it simple. You can't make every single one a work of art. And one thing I did was, with the metal, I just got a bit of packaging foam and just dabbed a much lighter silver onto a normal kind of gunmetal metal color, and then I just washed over some kind of rust effect, and then took my thumb and just sort of smudged it just to make it look kind of manky. And bits like the wrist wraps, I just sort of dry brushed, thinking who would care, and I picked out a little bit of color on each one where they had these orky glyphs. But as you can see, you're talking one layer of highlighting, because at some level you've got to stop. Same thing with black, one layer of highlighting, that's it. But then some things like the shoulder pads, I did go to town on a little bit. I say go to town on, I just splurged a bit of silver where I thought there would be scratches, and did a little bit of a few scratches with some kind of skin color, and then a bit of Rhinox hide, just to make it look like these things had been through a battle or two. So he's actually a bog standard orc. I probably just painted him as he was. Again, you can see just one layer of highlighting. But then as I said, I kind of mixed and matched just a few bits I had floating around. So again, I think that's a kind of boss head from the Fantasy Battle Sprue. Third-party heads are a godsend for orcs. I mean, it's so much better, that Spellcrow head, than a normal orc head. And do they kind of fit together? I mean, it's a real Paul Bonner infused head, and he looks particularly menacing, even with his cigarillo. But the paint, picking out things like the glyphs adds a little bit to it, and quality heads really bring out the best in these miniatures, because no one's looking at his tummy or his back plate or the straps around his legs. Those you just keep simple. I mean, that grey is, I think, possibly only I think one layer of highlighting and a wash. He's a normal fella, and you just paint neatly. You don't need to go to town, because they're going to just fold into one unit. I didn't bother drilling out the gun barrels. People always talk about it, but I just don't think it's worth it. And also, I never really managed to actually drill out the bit in the middle. I mean, look how bad I was. This was the early 2000s. I barely used green stuff before. I probably should put some kind of shoulder pad over it. But you can see how appalling that kind of... I extended the arm, and there's an appalling bit of green stuffing without even smoothing it down. But the thing is, did you notice that till I told you? In any case, he's an orc. He's probably had some kind of terrible wound on his shoulder. And that's a Spellcrow head. And I think the lower torso is Fantasy Battle as well. I mean, I had a go at doing my own glyphs, but I think freehand is not something that is ever going to be something I get into in any depth. I think you need to be an actual artist to do that. And these burner boys, I think I swapped on Dead Adventure for them for something, and they've come into their own now, because I think in every unit of brawlers, the close combat guys, you can have one guy with a flamethrower, and I mean, these are flamethrowers to write home about. And you can see there's that rust effect everywhere, and picking out the glyphs really does bring them a bit to life. What else we got here? Again, scratching and giving a bit of life to the red, I think takes him to the next level. The faces, I think I did 4, maybe 5 layers of highlighting, much more than the clothing, because, as I said, no one's eye is drawn to the clothing, their eye is drawn to the face, and especially the teeth. What have we got here? Another Spellcrow head, another Fantasy Battle head, and grenades, and obviously blood for the Blood God, which, as I always point out, is just silly and grim, but always good fun, especially with orcs. They might have twisted this guy's wrist, so he's not really holding that axe in a natural fashion, but who cares? And all of this kind of darting about meant that they needed to have coins underneath to pin them down. I say pin them down, just kind of counterbalance the weight, otherwise they would just keep falling over every time you move them. But this way, he can be pushed in any direction, and he's pulled down by the gravity of the weight of the coin. Though I've never really understood all of that stuff to do with gravity, because as I understand it, everything's being pulled down the same, and it's only whatever it's called, the resistance, like between the feather and the bowling ball, that means that one goes down much faster than the other. It's not necessarily to do with weight. Maybe it's to do with balance. Anyway, because the coin is heavier than the rest of the miniature, I don't know how it's anchoring it. All of you physicists out there can explain it to me. And that was quite a fun idea from my limited bank of ideas in 2000. I mean, it's not exactly sandwiched together properly, but that's the beauty of Orks. Nothing they do is sandwiched together properly. It's not exactly aquiline design. And I think this might have been from the biker sprue. And annoyingly, the Ork biker sprue, I've lost half the parts of that. So I haven't got enough to assemble all 3 bikes. And I've always got an eye out for more Ork bikes, the modern ones. And I'll find them eventually. Another religious fanatic. Maybe he's been sacrificing someone and thus got so much blood on his little knife. And this kind of axe, I think, is from the more recent but still cancelled and then brought back Ork Ball Boy sprue. And another orange Spellcrow head. I say orange, it's not orange obviously, just the hair. And I'm trying to work out if that's a scratch on the bit over here, or just a bit of dry brushing that's gone wrong. Either way, it'll be worth a bit of a dab to fix it up. And he's quite animated. And as I mentioned, so, you know, back in the day, a few weeks ago, he was just, there was no arm there. It was just a body with this dodgy mad boy conversion, no head. And I just put a head on, gave him a grenade arm, put on that armor pad, shoulder pad, probably from the Ork Boy sprue, motorbike sprue, and he looks all right. Does he look totally in keeping with the others? I mean, obviously looks in keeping with the ones which are also Spellcrow heads. But does he look all right next to the rest of these? I mean, I think they do look fine. Let's get a bit of a shot of the boys charging in. And as you can see, these aren't all beautiful and perfect. But there's now a lot more infantry in my Mantic Marauder army. And if you just saw all of this running towards you, what would you do? I know what I would do. Run!
But I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for choosing to spend your very valuable time with Stompy51's miniature adventure. I love it. I love reading the comments. So do leave any thoughts you have at the bottom and I'll get back to you. And please do subscribe to help people find out about my little journey. Keep well, keep safe, and see you soon.